Okay, so section 4.6 is talking to us about inverse functions and how to find them. And so we will get started with the first one. And in Hawks, the first question, or not necessarily the first question, but one of the questions that you're going to be given is a set of points. And so we're going to have -5, -4, 3, 4, -8, 6, and -6, -8. Okay, and this is going to be set R. And what it's going to ask you to do for step 1 is to find the inverse. So find R inverse. Well, we know from our notes and from the section studies that when we find the inverse of specifically a set of points, we take the x and the y and we literally just swap their locations. And so we're going to have -4, -5, 4, 3, 6, -8, and -8, -6. And so this will be the answer for part 1. And so then, secondly, part B, they're going to say find the domain and find the range of the inverse. And so we're going to be looking at this guy right here. We're going to be looking at the inverse and we're going to be listing the domain and the range. But we know from previous studies that the domain are all the x values and the range is all of the y values. And so from this inverse that we found, we're going to say that the domain is -4, +4, this is a 6, a very badly drawn 6, and a -8. Okay, fine. When we go to find the range, we just need all of the y values, again, of the inverse. So we're going to say that the range is -5, 3, -8, -6. And that's it. We're done. That is not a 3, that's a brace. Okay, and so number 1, totally done. All right, now the rest of the problems in this section are just you are getting a function and you are trying to determine if it has an inverse. And if it does have an inverse, you are trying to solve for it. And so let's go ahead and do that. So here we go. Number 2, we're going to be given the function a of x equals 2 over x plus 2. And we are supposed to be finding the inverse. Well, we know from the notes, the first thing that we need to do is rewrite the function notation using y. So we're going to have y equals 2 over x plus 2. And then the next step is for us to interchange the x and the y. So I will rewrite this as x equals 2 over y plus 2. And then my goal here is to solve for y. And so the y that I have down here, I'm trying to get that guy all by himself. And so in order for me to do that, I'm going to have to multiply both sides by y plus 2 so that I can get rid of the denominator. And that's going to leave me, when I do this distributing, I'm going to get yx plus 2x, and that's going to equal the 2 on the other side. And so now I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. And I'm going to get over here, I'm going to get yx equals 2 minus 2x. And then in order for me to get rid of, or to get this y by itself, I have to multiply, I have to divide every single thing by x. And so that's going to leave me with y equals 2 over x. These x's will cancel out, and that'll leave me with 2. And so now since I have solved for this y by itself, it's time for me to bring back my function notation. And so I'm going to say that a inverse of x equals 2 over x minus 2. And this is my final answer. Done. Okay, so now we're just going to try another one. And there are lots of different ways that these things look. And so this one looks a little different. If I have p of x, and that is equal to the cube root of x, and then on the outside, minus 4. My goal is the same. Rewrite this using a y notation. And then I want to get, of course, the x and the y swapped. So I'm going to have x equals the cube root of y minus 4. And then again, my goal is to get this teeny tiny y all by himself. So in order for me to do that, I have to undo everything that's being done. So I want to add 4 first to both sides, and that's going to give me x plus 4 equals the cube root of y. And in order for me to get rid of something that's being cube rooted, I have to raise it to the third. But I know what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. And so on the right-hand side, the cube root and the third are going to cancel. That's going to leave me with y equals x plus 4 to the third power. Now, I don't want you to have to FOIL all this and stuff out. There's no need. We got y by itself. That was the goal. So let's replace it with the inverse. So p inverse of x equals x plus 4 quantity cubed. And this is my total and final answer. Done. All right, now, The next one is going to look even more different, and we're going to have to talk about how to tackle the way that this looks. So if we look at the next one, number 4, we're going to have v of x equals, and it's going to be x plus 1 in parentheses. That's going to be raised to a fraction, 1/5, and on the outside we're going to have plus 4. Well, this one looks bad, okay, but we're going to do it the exact same way. So first things first, we're going to get rid of the function notation, bring in the y instead. Plus 1, this is still to the fraction, this is still plus 4. Okay, now we're going to swap our x and y. Okay, so far so good, nothing really bad. All right, now we have talked way back in my class specifically that if we had x to the 1/2, that was really the square root of x to the first power, so to speak. And so what's going to happen is down here where we have this fraction, we're going to have to turn that guy into a root instead of a fraction. And so what's going to happen is this is going to become x equals, instead of writing this as 1 to the 1/5, over here I did to the 1/2, that became the square root. This is going to become the 5th root of y plus 1. And then my plus 4 is still out there. Now I know this doesn't look great, but the fraction, so to speak, has been taken care of. And so now all I got to do is get this y by itself. So I'm going to subtract 4, and I'm going to run out of space. So let me get rid of some of this stuff. So over here on the other side, that's going to leave me with x minus 4 equals the 5th root of y plus 1. Well, in order for me to get rid of the 5th root of something, I have to raise it to the 5th power. The 5th root and the power will cancel. That'll give me x minus 4 to the 5th equals y plus 1. All right, now I have to subtract 1 from both sides. So I'm going to get x minus 4 to the 5th minus 1 equals y. And so now I have y all by itself. And so I want to replace this y with the inverse. So v inverse of x equals x minus 4 in parentheses raised to the 5th power minus 1. And this is my total and final answer. Done. Okay. Number 5. We're going to have h of x equals 2x to the 5th minus 9, all divided by -4. So this one looks different still. Okay, we have a negative on the bottom. We have an exponent in the top. We haven't seen one like this yet. So first things first is I need to replace the h of x with a y, and that will give me y equals, and then the function that I was given. And then I want to swap my x and my y's location. So I'm going to have x equals 2y to the 5th minus 9 over -4. Now I know in order to get rid of a fraction, I have to multiply by its denominator. So I'll multiply both sides by -4. And then that's going to give me -4x equals 2y to the 5th minus 9. And now it's just a matter of getting the y by itself. And so the first thing I'm going to do is add 9. And that's going to give me -4x plus 9 equals 2y to the 5th. Okay, well, I have to get y by itself. I'm going to have to divide everything by 2. And so then that's going to leave me with -4x plus 9 over 2 equals y to the 5th. And in order for me to get rid of something that's being raised to the 5th power, I'm going to have to take the 5th root. And of course, what I do to one side, I have to do to both. And so that's going to leave me with y equals the 5th root of, and then on the top, -4x plus 9, and then on the bottom, 2. And so in order for me to put my final answer up here, I'm going to get rid of the problem. All I have to do is take the y that I have down there at the bottom and replace it with the inverse. And so this is going to be h inverse of x equals the 5th root of, notice that my square root symbol is really big because I have the top and the bottom inside. So -4x plus 9, all divided by the number 2. And this is my final answer. Okay, number 6. We're going to start out with g of x equals x to the 1/3. So here's another fraction problem, plus 2. And so I'm going to start out by rewriting this as a y value. And I'm going to switch the x and the y location. And then if we think back, we remember, hey, when we have this fraction, it's actually the root. In this case, it's going to be the cube root. So I'm going to have x equals the cube root of y plus 2. I'm going to have to subtract 2 from both sides. That's going to give me x minus 2 equals the cube root of y. In order for me to get rid of the cube root, I have to raise it to the third. What I do to one side, I have to do to both. That's going to leave me with y equals x minus 2 whole thing cubed. And remember, I don't want you to FOIL all of this out. Our goal was to get y by itself. We did. And so then we're going to replace y with g inverse of x. And that's going to leave me with x minus 2 quantity to the third power. And then this is my final answer. And now I'm done. Okay, number 7. We're going to start out with g of x equals the cube root of 2x plus 4. And you have to make sure that that cube root is extending all the way through that problem. So I will rewrite this as y equals the cube root of 2x plus 4. And then, of course, I will switch the x and the y location. And then in order for me to get rid of the cube root, I'm going to have to raise it to the third. So raise this to the third. It's going to give me x to the third equals 2y plus 4. Well, now I'm going to have to subtract 4 from both sides. That's going to leave me with x to the third minus 4 equals 2y. And then I'm going to divide everything by 2. And so that's going to leave me with y equals x to the third minus 4 over 2. I will replace this y with the g of x inverse. So g inverse of x. And that's going to equal x to the third minus 4 over 2. And then, of course, this will be my final answer. Done. All right, number 8. We'll have p of x equals 4 times the cube root of x, and then a minus 2 on the outside. So I'll rewrite this in my y value. I'll switch the x and the y location. And then I say, okay, well, first things first, I'm going to have to add 2 to both sides. So I'm going to get x plus 2 equals 4 cube root of y. And then I'm going to have to, if we remember, there's a multiplication sign between this number and this cube root symbol. And so what's going to have to happen is I'm going to have to divide both sides by 4 in order to get rid of this 4. So that's going to leave me with x plus 2 over 4 equals the cube root of y. Well, in order for me to get rid of the cube root, I'm going to have to raise it to the third. And what I do to one side, I'm going to have to do to both. And so I'm going to get y equals x plus 2 over 4. The whole thing is going to be raised to the cube. And then I'm going to say, all right, well, I got y by itself. So I'm going to have p inverse of x equals x plus 2 over 4. And the whole thing is raised to the third power. And here's my final answer. Done. Okay, number 9, moving right along. We're going to get w of x equals, parenthesis, 3x minus 4, and then on the outside of this parenthesis is a 1/5. Okay, so I will rewrite this. So 3x minus 4 to the 1/5. I switch the x and the y location. And then we have to remember, when we see a fraction, we know that we're actually going to take the 5th root of this. So this is going to become x equals the 5th root of 3y minus 4. And so in order for me to get rid of the 5th root, I have to actually raise it to the 5th power. And what I do to one side, I have to do to both. So that's going to give me x to the 5th equals 3y minus 4. Well, now I'm going to have to add 4 to both sides. So that's going to give me x to the 5th plus 4 equals 3y. And now I'm going to have to divide both sides by 3. And that's going to give me y equals x to the 5th plus 4 over 3. And so I have y by itself. And so I bring in my w inverse of x. And I say that's x to the 5th plus 4 over 3. And so now, ta-da, done. Okay, just a few more to go. All right, so number 10. We're going to have w of x equals 2x plus 4 over a negative 5. So I rewrite it as a y. I switch the x and the y location. And then I say, okay, my y is stuck over here, right? So I have to get it by itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is multiply everything, each side by -5. So that's going to give me negative 5x equals 2y plus 4. All right, well then I'm going to have to subtract 4 from both sides. And that's going to give me negative 5x minus 4 equals 2y. And then the last thing I need to do here to get y by itself is to divide each side by 2. So I'm going to have y equals negative 5x minus 4 over 2. And then since I have the y by itself, I'm ready to roll. So I will bring in my w inverse of x, and I will say that my answer is 5x minus 4 over 2. And so now I'm done. All right, last one, number 11. W of x equals 3x to the 1/5 minus 4. So I rewrite it as a y, 3x to the 1/5 minus 4. I take the x and the y, swap their locations, and now I'm ready. And so what I'm going to do is I have to say, hey, I know that this guy right here is actually going to be the 5th root. So I'm going to say this is going to be the 5th root. However, you saw me almost make a mistake. We know that between this 3 and this y is a multiplication sign. And so the only thing that's actually being raised to the 5th, or to the 1/5, excuse me, is just this y value. So what I'd like to do first is go ahead and get rid of this 4. So let me do that. So let me go ahead and add 4 to both sides. And so that's going to give me x plus 4 equals 3 y to the 1/5. Now, as I mentioned up above, this 3 and this y are being multiplied. So let's go ahead and divide everything by 3. And so that's going to give me x plus 4 over 3 equals y to the 1/5. Now, I already said earlier that this is the 5th root. So what I can do is just leave the left-hand side alone for a moment and say that this is the 5th root of y. And in order for me to get rid of the 5th root, I have to raise it to the 5th. And so that's going to give me y equals x plus 4 over 3, whole entire thing raised to the 5th. And so now I have, of course, I've got the y by itself. And so I will say my final answer is w inverse of x equals x plus 4 on top divided by 3, whole entire thing to the 5th. And this is my final answer. And so now I'm done.